L'enregistrement est en cours.
Okay, so hi, I'm Skyler. I'm going to be talking about Collabora Office mobile apps and building and debugging them. You may remember, if you've been watching TTTs for a while, that I've done this before. Last time we talked about an overview of the mobile apps and how they were different from standard online builds. And then we went on to building them and debugging them. This time, we're going to skip the overview. So if you want that, go back and see the last talk. And we're also going to be a little quite short on the debugging tips because, again, we already did a lot of those. We're going to focus mostly on building the mobile apps because the build instructions are not completely clear, and last time we kind of glossed over a lot of details. I'm going to do this from a developer's perspective. I'm going to assume that you already know a bit about installing and developing Collabora Online. So I'm going to be quite quick on some of the sections on how to build core, say. Like last time, I'll be following a lot of the build instructions to make this presentation. So if you're interested, here are the posts on our blog, and you can follow along. So, building for Android then. First thing, you need Linux. You can't do this on Windows. You need Android Studio because Android Studio is used to install the NDK, and it's used to build the app. It's probably packaged for your distribution. If not, you can use JetBrains Toolbox, which can update it for you, or you can get the tags directly from android.com. I wouldn't recommend using the Flatpak because the Flatpak has Sandbox, which means that you can't always access developer tools from outside in it. And to build the mobile app, we're going to need to access things like npm to install node packages. And while you can get those inside of the Flatpak sandbox, there's a much more involved process to do so, and I haven't got it working. So I would recommend installing it outside of Flatpak. Let's get started. So first of all, you're going to need to install the NDK. The NDK is the native development kit. It's the Android APIs that let you communicate with your phone. To do that, you're going to want to go into Android Studio, open up your settings, go down to Languages and Frameworks to Android SDK. And you can see in this SDK tools, there's a little NDK side-by-side option. If we expand the show package details, then you'll get all of the different NDK versions that you can install. And you're going to want to install NDK 23.0. We suggest 23.0. We're considering an upgrade to 27.2 for the LibreOffice project, and at that point, Collabora Online will also update. So again, see the blog posts with all the build instructions to know what NDK version you should be installing. Another thing worth mentioning, the first few digits here are enough to be unique. 23.0 and 27.2 are the only versions that are 23.0 and 27.2. Don't worry too much about the big long string of numbers afterwards. They're going to be right. Okay. So once you've done that, you can build core. You're going to want to clone it, run autogen with these options and any standard options you prefer. And you're going to want to enable some debugging options as well, I imagine. After that, it's a fairly standard make command, as you will have done when you build core before. You'll also need Poco and ZStandard built for Android. We have scripts to build these inside of our Android build instructions. So if you go and get those, there are links to them on GitHub. You can run them with the arguments, the NDK version that you're using, as well as the output directory. I think we recommend your home directory /Android, which is where all of the Android SDK bits are stored, but you can put them wherever you like, really. Finally, you'll need to build online. Once again, we've got a few special configure options. particularly enable the Android app. And we've also got various things pointing to all the paths, as you may expect if you've built Collabora Online before. And finally, again, remember to enable your debug options. We've also got this with Android ABI option. I suspect your phone is ARM64 V8A because modern phones generally are. But you can get that with an ADB command that is, again, mentioned in the Android build instructions. It's worth noting that the with zstandard includes ends in /lib. That's correct. The paths that zstandard provides are a bit weird. So you end up with just the zstandard directory /lib being used for the includes, whereas the libs are in some longer path, including the Android API version. And then run make. Finally, for Android, you can head over to Android Studio. You can open the Android folder in online. Don't open the online project directory directly. There's a folder called Android inside of it that you should be opening. You can connect your device with ADB. There are various guides online on how to do this, or the Android Studio has a wizard to connect it over the network. And you can hit debug or the run button that's beside it to build and run the app. Great, it will spin for a few seconds, and then you'll get the app opening on your device. It'll wait for the debugger, and you will Collabora Online Development Edition. Well done. Okay, on to iOS. So you'll need a Mac, and you'll need a developer program subscription from Apple. We have iCloud and fonts capabilities, both of which need a developer program subscription. So unlike some apps where you can build them without, this is non-negotiable. We're aware that this is a huge barrier to entry. We're really sorry. This is Apple's restriction, not ours. That said, it is possible to build the app without the iCloud and fonts capabilities if you turn them off. We don't support this configuration and do not recommend it. If you try it, let me know how it goes, because I did it for the first time yesterday and it seemed to work. You can't run it in a simulator either. You have to have either a real device, or you can have an Apple Silicon M1, M2, etc. Mac, which you can run it as made for iPad on. So once again, you're going to build core. The only option you need this time is with distro LibreOffice iOS. We have some more recommended options in the build instructions if you really want, but you can pick what you want here. And as always, remember to enable debug util. We're going to need some dependencies. So with pip, we're going to have to install the Python, polib, and LXML libraries, and Node.js. The latest version of Node.js we currently support is 20.15.1. There are some build failures in the Node Canvas package with later versions. So if you install later versions, you'll get a lot of red error text telling you that Node Canvas failed to build. And that's a thing that we might fix in the future, but right now, download Node 20.15.1. Additionally, you're going to want to install package config, pixman, cia, pango, and giflib, and you should use Homebrew for this because it's got all the right versions of the packages just by running brew install. We also need Poco and zstandard. For zstandard, we can use the build zstandard iOS script. It's very similar to the Android version, except we don't provide an NDK path because there's no NDK. We're on iOS. We're also going to need CMake to use this script, so you can install that with Homebrew as well. Poco needs a bit more manual work. There's no script for iOS for it, so you can download it from the Poco project website and configure it and run make and install with some environment variables set. But don't worry if you don't remember that. The commands are all on the iOS build page, so you don't need to copy down directly all of the environment variables and stuff needed to make and make install. It's all there for you. All right, we're building online now. You can clone the online repository, configure it like so. We need the enable iOS app option and the with vendor option specifically to build for iOS, and the other things are all specifying where the paths are to all the POCO includes and libraries on your system. This time, lib and include are correct, let's say. There's no /lib on an include directory. And run make. Now it's time to open up Xcode. Like with Android, we opened up Android Studio to do the final build. This time, because it's iOS, we open up Xcode. You're going to have to go into the project configuration and change the bundle identifier. Android will let you build with a bundle identifier that doesn't belong to you. iOS won't. So you are going to have to go in and change it in your project settings. You can use the developer program website. The build page suggests you do, but it's not actually needed. Recent versions of Xcode allow you to change the bundle identifier and have Xcode register it for you. So here you can see we've got the Collabora mobile app as you will have it directly. I've switched the team to my own personal team, so it's not able to build with this bundle identifier. And you can see a few errors that it's failed registering the bundle identifier because it's already used. If we change it, and I've changed it here to fyi.starrysky.office.mobile, which is my domain, and then we hit the try again button that you saw on the previous page, it will provision a new certificate for development, and you can build the app. So let's hit the play button and build the app. So when you do this for the first time, the Xcode will fail to open the app for you. The way you fix this is to follow the instructions on the pop-up. Apple requires you to accept a developer certificate before it will allow you to run the app from that developer certificate. So if you go to your settings, general, device management, it will show up as a configuration profile and you can trust it. So let's build again. It will install and run. Congratulations, you've got Collabora Online Development Edition running on your iPad or iPhone. Okay, so that's how to build the mobile apps. Let's go on to a little bit of debugging. Once again, I'm going to keep this pretty brief because last time I already discussed a fair few debugging tricks. If you're interested in those, you can go back and rewatch that talk. In both mobile apps, there are three parts. There's the app-specific code that's in Java for Android or Objective-C for iOS, and you'll want to be debugging that with the Android Studio or Xcode IDEs. You've got the core and CoolWSD C++, and you'll need to be debugging that in the Android Studio or Xcode IDEs, but you'll want to use LLDB because the files are not directly in the project, so it's a bit harder to navigate to them and set breakpoints, and neither Android Studio nor Xcode can always find the breakpoint location, but you will be able to successfully do it if you set breakpoints on your functions with LLDB. And finally, there's the online side. This is JavaScript and sometimes a bit of TypeScript. And you'll want to use your browser DevTools to debug that. Your browser in this case is Chrome or Safari, depending on whether you are using Android or iOS. You might need the IDE and the browser debug tools open at the same time if you're debugging something that, for example, happens due to communication between online and also the app-specific side. Okay. The browser DevTools, because you're debugging a mobile device, your browser DevTools are only going to be the remote debugger. So that depends on what web view your system is using. For Android, it's going to be Chromium-based. For iOS, it's going to be Safari. So you can always get a Chromium-based browser or Safari and go to the remote debugger in those and open up the Collabora Online web view. You need to connect your device to your computer, and then you would debug it as you would any other browser window. So, for example, you can debug it like you would debug Safari on iOS or like you would debug Chrome on Android. You can only debug the app web view in debug builds. If you download something off of the Play Store or the App Store today, we do not enable debugging the web view in that. So you have to build it yourself with debugging enabled in order to debug the web view. For native Android code, Android Studio works, and LLD can set breakpoints in core code. You will also get some warnings telling you that files are out of project for core code. This is normal because LibreOffice Core isn't inside of the Android project, but that's okay. It's still linked against it and running the code. And if you set breakpoints using LLDB, you can still see where it's breaking and follow it through, see the variables, the stack, etc. And if you're interested in how to set breakpoints using LLDB, I mentioned this in the previous talk. Further Android tips, ADB is your best friend, but sometimes it's quite unwieldy. So there are lots of re-implementations of interfaces to access ADB. For example, the file system is a pain, but Android Studio has a way to view the device file system in a much nicer way. ADB Logcat is extremely basic, but Android Studio has a way to filter it by what app bundle you're using and search in it, etc. And there are various other tools as well if you don't want to use Android Studio for that. So if you're having trouble doing something with ADB, it's worth looking at if someone else has written something that can substitute. Android Studio debug tools sometimes miss things that LLDB catches. For example, sometimes the stack in Android Studio is not complete, but if you navigate in LLDB using up and down, then you will get to stack frames that Android Studio didn't see. Okay, onto iOS. For native code, Xcode is your friend, and you can use LLDB to set breakpoints in core code in much the same way as in Android. And in my previous talk, I also discussed how to use LLDB to set breakpoints in Xcode. No simulators, but the My Mac designed for iPad option is really helpful for more access than iOS will give you. For example, if you want to access temporary files with iOS, it's sometimes quite a pain. But if you go and use the My Mac designed for iPad option, the file URLs that are printed out by the app will just be correct files on your file system, and you can just access them as you would any other file in macOS. So if you're having trouble accessing something because your iPad is too locked down, try running it on My Mac designed for iPad. Okay, the last thing I have to do is a slide on things to try when it all falls apart, because there's some common mistakes that I make on mobile all of the time, and if you can run through these steps, it will maybe help you avoid some of my common pitfalls. First thing, update your browser / your system / your device. It's really important, particularly when debugging the web view, that your browser on your mobile device and your browser on your desktop device are the same version. So if you're running an iPad on iOS 18 and it's just updated, you'll often need to update Safari or you won't be able to connect. If you're using Android and you're having trouble connecting using ADB, check your UDEV rules. If you are on Linux, there is different permissions to access the devices, and it's relatively common for Android devices not to be immediately allowed to be accessed by any user to connect to ADB. But you can set up UDEV rules so that you can access your device using your ADB without having to run it as root. make sure you switch core branch. This is a common one. You won't be able to install the mobile. You won't be able to run the mobile apps necessarily with core master. You need to be running CO 2404 nowadays, or if you're watching this later, maybe CO 2504. And make sure you rerun make after changing your code. It's relatively common for me to change something in the code and then forget to rerun make, click the play button in the IDE, and then be confused about why my app's not changing. And for some code, you can do this. For the app-specific code that we have, the Java and Objective-C, you can normally hit play and it just works. But if you're changing something in, say, core, you really do need to rerun make. And lastly, rewatch the previous talk I gave on mobile devices. There were some more debugging tips in there and a bit of an overview, which might be helpful. Yes. Also, finally, if you're still having trouble, let us know by making an issue on GitHub or by sending me an email. Our repository is collaboraonline/online, and my email is skyler.grey@collabora.com. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Skyler, for the presentation. Now, guys, questions. Miklos?
It's not really a question, more like a comment. You mentioned that with new enough node versions, there is this problem with the canvas module. So just a few days ago, Dennis was looking at that. It was only used for some tests, and instead now it's solved by a mocking. So that problematic canvas module is meant to be gone, and everyone should celebrate that.
Oh, okay. Cool. So it's going to work with later node versions? That's awesome.
That's the theory. We should try it and see on, but that blocker is meant to be solved.
That's great news. So yeah, I guess you heard it here first. If you're seeing this in the future, check whether you can use a later node version on the build instructions. We will update that.
Okay. Thank you. Kellen?
No, nothing from me.
Okay. Banobe?
Skyler, you have mentioned that this is for building on iOS and building on Android. What I would like to know is, what I've not understood is, if I'm to make a change in Android, I mean, if I'm to make a change, how do I test this change on both Mac, on both the iOS and Android? Is it that when I'm writing this code, I'm to replicate it on my MacBook and then also on my Linux? I'm trying to get that part.
Yeah, so if I'm making a change that affects both Android and iOS, what I'll normally do is make it on one of them and then push it up and pull it on the other one to go and rebuild it and test whether it works properly. You'll need to build both of the apps separately. You can't build them together. Alternatively, if it's just a change in online, then you might be able to get away with just running it in online and using the web view on both devices in Safari and Chrome. Test if your original bug shows up in the browser, and if it does, then you can skip the building the mobile apps altogether.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Clove? Okay, Darshan?
No questions. Thanks, Skyler.
Ezine?
No questions. Thank you, Skyler.
Gokai? Okay. Jaume? Okay. Joao?
No questions, thanks. And cool presentation.
Yes. Mevin? Okay, Micah?
No questions, thanks.
Sahil? Sahid? Okay, no question. Vivek? Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. See you all.